You send a text, then you wait. Minutes turn into hours, and the silence from the other side begins to feel like a heavy weight. In that quiet, anxious space, the urge takes hold to send just one more message, just to be sure they saw the first one. We are taught that effort is the primary driver of success. If you study harder, your grades improve. Work extra hours, get a promotion. In almost every area of life, more input equals more reward. But when we apply this same logic to our relationships, the mechanics change. Chasing someone's attention doesn't draw them closer. It creates a pressure that naturally makes them want to retreat. Relationships rely on a balance of effort and reciprocity. When we endlessly pile weight onto one side of the scale to make up for a lack of interest from the other, we don't restore the balance. We only fracture the central fulcrum of the connection. Lena lived this dynamic every day in the village of Silver Valley. As an assistant in a busy bakery, she was the person everyone relied on. She was the first to offer help and the last to leave, constantly adjusting her own behavior to ensure the comfort of those around her. Yet, despite her constant presence and help, Lena often felt like a ghost. She moved through the crowded shop, handing out warm loaves and smiles, while feeling an acute, hollow sensation that she was entirely invisible to the people she served. Beneath her kindness was a secret, driving fear. Lena believed that attention was a prize she had to earn through sheer persistence. If a friend pulled away, she would lean in, convinced that if she could just be helpful enough, they would eventually see her value. This unilateral drive to connect was her undoing. By refusing to let others meet her halfway, she was accidentally building the very walls that kept her isolated. The breaking point came with her best friend, Sarah. Over several weeks, Sarah stopped coming to the bakery and ignored every one of Lena's messages. Lena's response was predictable. She sent more texts, checked her phone every 10 minutes, and spiraled into a loop of self-blame. Finally, Lena confronted her at the market. She asked what she had done wrong, her voice thick with the need for reassurance. But Sarah didn't offer comfort. She turned away with visible annoyance, telling Lena that she was simply too much to handle and needed to stop following her. The market's noise, the shouting vendors, the rattling carts, seemed to drop into a vacuum. Lena stood frozen, the harshness of the rejection ringing in the sudden silence of her mind. That evening, Lena sat by the river and overheard two villagers talking. They weren't being cruel, just observant. They noted how Lena always seemed to be chasing Sarah, like a shadow that didn't know when to disappear. Sarah wasn't busy. She was exhausted by the weight of Lena's desperation.
Desperate effort does not buy loyalty. It creates a dynamic where the other person feels suffocated rather than loved.
As Lena sat by the water, the small injured sparrow she had fed earlier landed on a nearby post. It didn't perform, it didn't sing for a reward, and it didn't try to get her attention. It simply stayed there, sharing the silence. Lena watched the bird for a long time. For years, she treated every relationship like a transaction where she paid the highest price first. But the sparrow's presence cost her nothing. There was no chase, no performance, just a quiet, unforced coexistence. She realized then that Sarah's departure wasn't a loss of something she owned, but a subtraction of a presence that had required her to work for every crumb of affection. By walking away, Sarah had cleared a space in Lena's life that had been occupied by a one-sided struggle. Lena took a deep breath of the cold river air. She decided right then and there it was time to stop. No more follow-up texts, no more apologies for things she hadn't done. She would no longer try to hold a door shut that someone else was trying to walk through. Real agency begins with the realization that you must be willing to let go of anyone who requires you to diminish yourself just to keep them in the room. Back at the bakery, the change in Lena was subtle but absolute. She worked with a calm focus, no longer glancing at her phone every time the door chimed. She was warm and polite, but she was no longer auditioning for people's approval. Seeking validation from the outside in creates a frantic energy. We send outward pulses to distant, unresponsive connections, hoping to find a sense of security that we haven't yet built within ourselves. When that forced effort stops, the center of the network stabilizes. This stillness acts as a filter. It creates the space for connections to drift inward naturally, allowing for the formation of ties that are balanced and mutual from the start. Sarah never returned, and the silence between them remained. But in the space Lena had cleared, new people began to appear. The local tailor who shared her interest in art, and a customer who actually took the time to ask Lena about her day. These connections didn't require a chase, they simply arrived. Self-respect acts as a sieve. It lets the superficial and one-sided connections fall away, making room for people who are capable of seeing your value without being convinced of it. At the end of the day, Lena stood outside the bakery as the sun dipped below the hills. The sparrow returned, landing on her shoulder voluntarily. She didn't have to reach for it. You cannot force another person to recognize your worth. The more you try to prove your value through pursuit, the more you suggest that your value is something that can be debated. True belonging requires the courage to stand still. It is the act of being yourself so clearly that the right people can finally recognize you. When you stop chasing the wrong people, you give the right people the chance to find you. You send